They tortured a 12-year-old boy for 2 years, murdered him, and dissolved his body in acid to prevent his family from being able to bury him. These men are also responsible for explosions and the deaths of judges, journalists, a president, and many more. We bring you the deadliest hitmen of the Italian Mafia. Maurizio Avola. Maurizio Avola stepped into the world of mafia crime in 1983, when he became a hitman for the Sicilian Mafia. Avola was considered one of the top hitmen of the notorious mafia crew, and was involved in numerous killings and other criminal activities. He was reportedly responsible for the murder of several law enforcement officials and rival mafia members. Some reports indicate that he killed as many as 80 people before the police captured him. But how did he become a murderer at only 21? Avola had always had eyes on living a rich life, with a lot of money and all the good things of life at his fingertips, but he wasn't prepared to get it by diligent or honest means. While working at his father's restaurant, washing dishes, sweeping, and polishing glasses, he had already become an armed robber under the cloak of night. Not long after, he drew the attention of a mafioso called Marcello d'Agata, who felt Avolo had talents that could benefit the mafia. First, it began with robberies, and then one day, he was offered to kill a man and become a full mafioso. To him, it was a golden opportunity, and he decided to carry out the operation. That murder was the first of many killings he would perpetrate for his bosses. He went wherever he was sent, no questions asked, and the respect he had for his bosses was greater than whatever fear he nursed for his own life. He always hit his targets, and would end the night with partying and drinking while the bodies of his victims were burning in a ditch. On the 26th of February 1993, the hands of the law finally caught up with him, and the police arrested him. This was just 24 hours after he had killed his best friend, Pinocchio De Leo, on the instructions of senior gang leaders. An informant had tipped him off about his whereabouts. The arrest turned out to be a lifesaver in a rather funny twist of fate. At about the same time, a group of unknown gunmen was parked outside his apartment. Their mission was uncertain, but Avola was certain that they came for him. 1 year later, he became an informant and helped authorities track down several other gang members. He figured out that his bosses had betrayed him and were after his life because of how much he knew. As it dawned on him that he was only alive because of the police, he shifted allegiances. The information he revealed was crucial in uncovering several mysteries, including the murder of Giovanni Falcone, a prosecuting magistrate whose work led to hundreds of mafioso arrests. He had been killed in 1992 together with his wife and 3 other police officers with a remote-controlled detonator that set off 400 kilograms of TNT explosives. The man who activated the explosives is the next one on the list. Giovanni Bruscia. Giovanni Bruscia, a former member of the Italian Mafia Cosa Nostra, was involved in numerous crimes throughout his criminal career. Bruscia was considered one of the most dangerous and ruthless hitmen in the history of mafias. When his bosses decided that it was time to eliminate Giovanni Falcone, they decided that none other than Bruscia was the man for the job, so he was out in charge of the team. First, they began by planting high-grade explosives under a highway. They had received intelligence reports that Falcone would pass that route on his way from the airport. The operation began early and was done as discreetly as possible. When it was all set, they moved to a mountain while an informant driving behind Falcone's entourage continued to feed them information on their movements. When it was time, Bruscia was ready and set off the explosives. Their target and 4 others were killed on the spot, while more than 20 others were fatally injured. The explosion left a huge crater in the road and sent waves of fear throughout Italy. Bruscia also played a role in the murder of another prominent anti-mafia prosecutor, Paolo Borsellino, in the same year. Authorities were determined to hunt down the perpetrators, and a crackdown on mafioso and other associated gangsters began. At the start of 1996, it was determined that Bruscia was involved in the operation. Aside from that, he was also tried and sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment for killing a tax collector. He remained in hiding until the 20th of May 1996, when the police discovered his hideout. Reports say that he was just about to watch a movie documenting the life and brutal killing of Giovanni Falcone when a squad of police officers burst into his apartment. He became a collaborator with the authorities, providing crucial information on the inner workings of the mafia. He confessed to over 100 murders, including the Falcone and Borsellino killings. Bruscia also admitted that he had kidnapped and murdered a young boy, Giuseppe De Matteo, the son of a former gang member, Santino De Matteo, who had become a police informant in 1993 after the bombing. He tortured the boy for over 2 years, sending gory pictures to his father in jail, eventually getting him strangled. Bruscia then dissolved his body in acid. He was sentenced to serve 25 years in prison, followed by 4 years of parole for cooperating with the authorities. Filippo Marchesi. Filippo Marchesi was a notorious hitman of the Sicilian Mafia. He was born in Palermo, Sicily, in 1938, and became one of the Mafia's most ruthless and feared hitmen. Like most other hitmen, his activities were done as discreetly as possible, and he proved to be elusive to authorities, until the arrest of Vincenzo Sinagra, who was once an associate of the Mafia, but became an informant for the police. He also revealed the gruesome details of Marchesi's activities, including what was known as the Room of Death. It was just a small apartment, but the things that went on there were more than enough to make chills run down the spine of just about any person. His targets were lured into the apartment by whatever means they came up with, or simply kidnapped. As soon as they were ushered into that room, they would not come out alive. Marchesi would strangle them with a rope, while Sinagra held the legs of the victim down as they struggled for dear life. Many of the victims were tortured before they were eventually killed, and the deadly hitman seemed to delight in seeing them in pain. He would sit on a chair, watching them squirm in pain as he masturbated and snorted large amounts of cocaine. When he was satisfied, he would then get up and murder them. To cover his tracks, he made sure that none of the bodies were found, so they were mostly chopped into small chunks, dissolved in acid, and then dumped into the sea. But being a good hitman and helper to his bosses comes at a costly price. They decided that he was too valuable to be alive, so they plotted to kill him. He was deceived and asked to meet with some gang members in an abandoned warehouse. Unknown to him, it would be his last day on Earth. He was killed by his fellow hitmen, who strangled him and dissolved his body in acid. To avoid an uproar from his associates, his bosses lied that he had mistakenly killed himself while loading a gun in preparation for an operation. They also added that they had buried him in a hurry to avoid warranting the suspicion of the police, who would attempt to come for his associates and relatives. Their tactic worked until many years later, when one of the men who killed him wound up in jail and revealed the truth. Filippo Marchesi killed as many as 100 people, but he was dead before the police could get a hold of him and make him pay for his crimes. But they did get to one of his superiors. Salvatore Riina. He was brought into the Mafia by his own father, who assigned him his first killing at the age of 17. He was instructed to kill a businessman who had been kidnapped, and this marked the beginning of his career as a hitman. He grew to become one of the deadliest hitmen the Italian Mafia had ever had. In fact, he was the one who gave the orders for and orchestrated the murder of renowned prosecutor Giovanni Falcone. His specialty was murdering every opposition and knocking out all his rivals. He was reported to have eliminated all of his rivals, hundreds of them, one after the other. He killed politicians, journalists, law enforcement officials, and members of other gangs. He was nicknamed the Beast due to his violence, and he instilled fear in people who tried to come after him by making examples of others. It was common knowledge that if you went after Riina, he would turn and come after you with everything he had. He stopped at nothing, and was notorious for his extravagant murder tactics. As seen in the bombing of Falcone in 1992, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in absentia, as the police continued to seek ways to fish him out and bring him face to face with the law. Riina was eventually captured by Italian authorities in 1993 and sentenced to multiple life sentences in prison for his role in various mafia-related crimes, including murder, extortion, and drug trafficking. While in prison, he strived to remain in control of the mafia by sending secret orders to his subordinates, but the hood on him was tightened, and all communication ties were severed. His prosecution led to the revelation of several of his dastardly acts, including the killing of a Sicilian president, Piersanti Mattarella, who was shot in 1989 while sitting in his car. But he refused to cooperate with the authorities by becoming an informant and revealing the details of the inner workings of the mafia. He showed no signs of repentance, and was reported to have said that even if he were kept for 1,000 years, no one would succeed in breaking him. Riina died in prison in 2017 at the age of 87. His death marked the end of an era in the Sicilian Mafia, as he was considered one of the most powerful and ruthless bosses in the Mafia's history. He took to his grave a lot of useful information that would have helped in hacking down the Italian Mafia culture. Luciano Leggio. Luciano Leggio was an Italian mobster and one of the most notorious bosses of the Sicilian Mafia. He was born on January 6, 1925 in Corleone, a town in the province of Palermo, Sicily. Leggio is often called the boss of bosses due to his leadership of the Corleonese clan, one of the Mafia's most powerful and violent factions. He was involved in criminal activities from a very young age and had always shown tendencies towards crime and violence. His first crime on record was when he stole corn at 18 and served a 6-month prison sentence. When he came out, he had just one thing on his mind: vengeance. So he went after the man who had reported him to the police and murdered him. 2 years later, in a desperate search for a job, he killed a farmhand so he could replace him. Then he went ahead to take over the farm by forcing the owner to cede it to him at gunpoint. Around this time, he was handpicked by mafia bosses who saw promise in his violent way of life. As expected, Leggio quickly rose through the ranks of the mafia. He was known for his brutality and was responsible for numerous murders and acts of violence. On the 10th of March 1948, he kidnapped a trade union union activist who was actively involved in helping farmhands. He was Placido Risotto. It is unclear what issues he had with him. Still, even the 12-year-old shepherd boy Giuseppe Letizia, who witnessed the murder, was taken hostage and killed the following day with a lethal injection. The activist's remains were not found until 60 years later, and his father's body had to be exhumed to aid the identification process. Leggio had many enemies who tried to kill him. One of them was Michel Navarro, a mafia doctor. He deceived Leggio into a private meeting, but upon arrival, the hitman was faced by 15 other hitmen. He managed to escape and launched a massive attack on Navarro a few weeks later, killing him and his friends as they drove home. That was not enough for him, as he went ahead to kill 3 other friends of the doctor. This sinister hitman also killed a general attorney of Sicily, Pietro Scaglione. Luciano Leggio was arrested several times during his criminal career, but he managed to find his way in and out of the corridors of justice. The first time was in 1964, when he was captured but released 4 years later due to a lack of substantial evidence. Reports indicate that the evidence had, in fact, been tampered with, and the presiding judges and prosecutors were sent death threats. He remained a free man until the 16th of May 1974, when he was captured and sentenced to life imprisonment. Despite being behind bars, Leggio continued to wield considerable power within the mafia, ordering the murder of Lieutenant Colonel Giuseppe Russo and Judge Terranova in 1977 and 1979, respectively. Leggio died in prison on November 15, 1993, at 68 of a heart attack. Messina Denaro. Matteo Messina Denaro, also known as Diabolique, was born in Castelvetrano, Sicily, in 1962, and had been on the run from Italian authorities since the late 1990s until January 2023, when the police captured him to the cheers and applause of many. For 30 years, he had managed to stay hidden from security operatives until he registered at a private clinic under a false name. All the police had was a computerized copy of his picture and snippets of voice recordings, but they had kept a close watch over his relatives, family members, and anyone who could lead to him, yet all to no avail. The code of secrecy kept him hidden and protected for 3 decades until operatives started to pick up some information from discussions between his close relatives at their wiretapped homes. But why was there such a jubilation when he was captured? Denaro is believed to be one of the most powerful and dangerous mafia bosses in Italy, and the last man standing after the notorious mass arrest and prosecution of mafiosos following the killing of Giovanni Falcone. Denaro was a daredevil who boasted that the number of people he had killed could very well fill up an entire cemetery. He was one of the men responsible for a 1993 bombing attack in Florence, Milan, and Rome, where almost a dozen people were killed, including a newborn, a 9-year-old child, and their parents. He was also said to have killed a rival alongside his pregnant girlfriend. Despite being on the run, Denaro continued to play a significant role in the mafia's activities, allegedly giving orders from hiding places and maintaining close ties with other mafia members. He had a reputation for being highly secretive and was believed to have had a network of underground bunkers to hide in. However, it was his health that eventually failed him and led to his arrest. Police began to suspect that he was battling cancer due to internet searches from his associates and coded conversations talking about cancer. So they doubled down and began tracking all cancer patients within his age group until they finally narrowed their search to a few people. They seemed to have a long way to go until an elderly man booked a chemotherapy treatment. The police showed up and found out it was none other than Matteo Messina Denaro. With the last man standing now captured, is this the end of the Italian Mafia? I'll leave that question to you.